She ordered me like I was her driver, demanding I hand over the keys to my father's car. But when I refused, she grabbed the door handle, and that single mistake set off a chain of events that ended with police dragging her away in handcuffs, right in front of the entire neighborhood. The morning started with the kind of quiet that only country neighborhoods know. Dew shimmering across the manicured lawns, a thin mist curling around the lampposts, and the occasional bark of a restless dog. My ranch-style house sat at the very end of the cul-de-sac, where the street bent toward the old woods, far from the prim perfection demanded by the homeowners association. To me, it was paradise. To the HOA, it was a battlefield. And then, of course, there was her, the woman everyone called Karen, though her actual name was Deborah. She was the HOA president, self-crowned queen of the subdivision, and she treated every sidewalk crack and every unmowed federal crime. She wasn't content to patrol the streets with her clipboard. No, she invaded lives. She'd left notes in my mailbox about my choice of mailbox paint, complained about the way my truck ruined the uniform aesthetic of the neighborhood, and once tried to tell me my dog's bark was in violation of quiet hour codes. But it wasn't until the morning she demanded a ride in my car that the storm truly broke. I had just finished washing my pride and joy, a deep black 1969 Dodge Charger. To me, it wasn't just a car, it was history, a piece of my late father, who had spent countless evenings teaching me how to hold a wrench, how to listen to an engine's heartbeat, and how to keep steel alive. That car was his memory, rolling on four wheels. As the sunlight caught its chrome, I heard the sharp staccato of high heels on pavement. I didn't need to look up. I knew the rhythm of her approach like the rattle of a snake. "You there," she called, her voice crisp, condescending, sharp enough to slice bread. I turned slowly, rag still in my hand, water dripping onto the driveway. "Morning, Deborah." She adjusted her oversized sunglasses, the kind that hid half her face, and tilted her head like a disapproving schoolteacher. "I need you to give me a ride." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "My car broke down 2 blocks over. I have a board meeting at City Hall. It's urgent. I don't have time for Uber or waiting on anyone else." She waved her manicured hand toward my Charger, like she was pointing at a taxi. "So take me, now." I let out a short laugh, the kind that slips out when disbelief hits harder than anger. "This isn't a rideshare service, and you don't get to order me around." Her lips tightened. She lowered her sunglasses so I could see her eyes, the same piercing blue eyes she used when shaming neighbors into painting their fences or trimming their hedges. "You're part of this community, and as HOA president, I expect cooperation. Don't test me." Something inside me snapped, not in rage, but in that cold, crystalline way that precedes revenge. I leaned against the Charger, crossing my arms. "Deborah, you fined me for leaving my trash bins out 3 hours too long. You've threatened me over the color of my shutters. And now you want me to chauffeur you around in the car my father and I rebuilt with our own hands? Not a chance." Her face flushed, blotches of red beneath her powder. "You don't seem to understand. I wasn't asking." She stepped closer, her perfume chokingly sweet. "You will drive me." "Or what?" I asked softly. That's when she made her mistake. She reached out and grabbed the driver's side door handle, tugging like she had any right to touch it. The metallic click of her nails on chrome was like a gunshot to my nerves. "Get away from my car," I warned. "Do you know what happens to homeowners who refuse to follow association directives?" She hissed. "I can make your life hell. I can have this thing declared a nuisance. I can tow it, fine you daily, bury you in paperwork until you beg for relief. Now open the door." The neighborhood was quiet around us. Curtains fluttered as a couple of neighbors peeked out.
People loved to watch when Deborah struck. She fed on it, the attention, the fear. But today was different. I didn't move. I let the silence hang heavy until she grew impatient and yanked the handle again, harder this time. "Deborah," I said, my voice steady as steel, "you've just committed trespass." Her laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Don't get ridiculous." But I was already pulling out my phone. "You put your hands on my property after I told you to step back. That's attempted unlawful entry, and I don't think the police are going to care much about your title of HOA president." The shift was immediate. She sneered, but her eyes flickered with a shadow of doubt. "You wouldn't dare." I dialed. "Let's find out." The dispatcher answered, and I explained calmly that a woman was attempting to force her way into my vehicle after I had refused to give her a ride. The operator told me officers were on their way. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't sound panicked, and that made her even more uneasy. "You're going to regret this," she spat, backing away, but not far enough to escape the gaze of the neighbors now recording with their phones. The minutes stretched like hours, but when the black and white cruiser rolled around the corner, relief spread through me. Two officers stepped out. One I knew, Officer Ramirez, a no-nonsense cop who'd grown up in the area. His gaze immediately locked onto Deborah, then me, then the Charger gleaming in the driveway. "What's going on here?" Ramirez asked. Deborah sprang into action, her voice dripping with false victimhood. "Officer, thank goodness, she pointed at me with a trembling hand, refused to help me. My car broke down and he's trying to frame me, to accuse me of crimes. Me, HOA president. I demand he be cited for harassment." Ramirez's brow arched, unimpressed. He turned to me. "Sir?" I told him the story exactly as it had happened, no embellishments, just facts. I even gestured to the security camera mounted above my garage, silently recording everything. Deborah's mask slipped for just a second when she realized she was on tape. "Ma'am," Ramirez said evenly, "is it true you tried to open his car door?" Well, he was supposed to give me a ride. It's a community obligation." Ramirez exchanged a look with his partner, the kind that said, "We've seen this before." He stepped forward. "Ma'am, placing your hands on someone's vehicle without permission after being told no is trespassing. Attempted unlawful entry at the very least. And considering your threats," he nodded at the gathered neighbors, "this could be construed as harassment." Her face went pale. "This is absurd. I'm the president of this neighborhood." "You're also a citizen under the law," Ramirez replied. "Titles don't make you immune." When the cuffs clicked around her wrists, the entire street seemed to exhale. Gasps, murmurs, and even a few quiet chuckles rippled across the cul-de-sac. For years she had ruled with fear, and now, for the first time, she was powerless. As the officers led her to the cruiser, she twisted back toward me, eyes burning with venom. "You'll pay for this. You'll all pay for this." I simply leaned against my Charger again, rag in hand, and gave her the smallest smile. "Enjoy the ride." The door shut, the cruiser pulled away, and the silence that followed was sweeter than any victory I had ever known. But I knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. For people like Deborah, humiliation was never the end. It was only fuel. And somewhere deep inside me, I welcomed it. Because if she thought today was the worst day of her life, she had no idea what was coming next. The morning after Deborah was taken away, the neighborhood felt different. The air itself seemed lighter, like the trees had exhaled after years of suffocating under her tyranny. Children rode their bikes down the street without fear of being scolded for noise violations. A neighbor across the road, old Mr. Dorsey, finally dared to set out his weather-worn rocking chair on the porch, something she had fined him for twice.
For a moment, I thought it was over, that maybe, just maybe, Deborah's time as self-proclaimed queen was finished. But people like her don't vanish after a single defeat. They fester, they plot, they come back with sharper claws. And she did. 3 days later, her SUV reappeared in her driveway. The engine rattled faintly, like it had been hastily repaired. I was pulling weeds from my flower bed when I saw her step out. No sunglasses this time, no perfect posture. She looked bruised, wounded, but her eyes carried a fire that promised she wasn't done with me. "You'll regret humiliating me," she said across the street, loud enough for passing joggers to hear. She didn't wait for my reply, just vanished inside her house. The threats started small. A fine appeared in my mailbox. Violation 14B, grass length exceeding regulation. And measured it myself. It wasn't. Then another notice, unauthorized vehicle parking. It was my driveway. By the end of the week, I had 7 letters threatening escalating penalties. I laughed them off at first. But then, she escalated. One evening as I walked out to my charger, I saw it, a thin, deliberate key scratch running along the passenger door. My stomach dropped. My hand shook. That car wasn't just steel and paint, it was my father's ghost, our bond immortalized in chrome. I felt rage like a furnace inside me. But rage, unchecked, only feeds people like her. And I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. No, I was going to end this, strategically, legally, permanently. So I began documenting everything. Every fine, every threat, every slanderous remark shouted across the street. My security cameras caught her circling near my driveway more than once at night. I kept logs, timestamps, duplicates stored on the cloud. The neighbors, tired of her reign, started whispering to me. One gave me a recording of her berating him for hanging an American flag that was too large. Another handed me a crumpled notice where she had threatened foreclosure over unapproved garden gnomes. Piece by piece, I built a case. But she wasn't idle either. She doubled her attacks. Letters threatened to tow my charger. Then came the ultimate insult, a notice of pending lien on my property for failure to comply with HOA guidelines. I marched straight to the county records office, and that's where I uncovered the fatal flaw. Deborah had been filing liens and violations without proper HOA board votes. In fact, most of her board had resigned months ago, tired of her dictatorship. She wasn't just breaking neighborhood rules, she was falsifying authority, using HOA power as her personal weapon. That was the crack in her armor I'd been waiting for. I called Ramirez, the officer who had cuffed her days earlier. "I've got something you need to see," I told him. He met me at the diner downtown, and over black coffee, I slid a folder across the table, thick with evidence, fraudulent letters, testimonies from neighbors, security footage of her vandalizing my car. He flipped through it slowly, his eyes narrowing. When he reached the forged lien notice, he let out a low whistle. "She's in deep, real deep. This isn't HOA business anymore. This is fraud, harassment, property damage. You might have just handed her the rope she's going to hang herself with." The plan unfolded quicker than I imagined. Ramirez brought the file to the district attorney. Subpoenas were issued. Neighbors, once cowed into silence, lined up to testify. It was as if my small act of defiance had cracked the dam, and now everyone who'd suffered under Deborah was ready to let the floodwaters loose. The day of her arrest came on a Saturday morning. Ironically, the same day she had organized one of her notorious, mandatory neighborhood cleanups. She stood in front of her house, barking orders at reluctant volunteers, clipboard in hand like nothing had changed. That's when the cruisers rolled in.
At first, she smiled, mistaking their arrival for an endorsement of her authority. "Officers!" she called out, waving them over. "Good, you're here. I need you to enforce compliance. Several households have not shown up for cleanup duty." But her smile curdled when Ramirez stepped forward, papers in hand. "Deborah Jensen, you're under arrest for vandalism, harassment, filing fraudulent legal documents, and misuse of HOA funds." The clipboard slipped from her hand and clattered to the pavement. Gasps rippled through the crowd of neighbors, phones already out to record history. "You can't do this!" she shrieked
as the cuffs locked around her wrists. "I'm the president! I make the rules!" "No, you broke them," Ramirez said firmly, leading her toward the cruiser. She twisted in the officer's grip, desperate, rabid. "This isn't over! You hear me? None of you are safe, especially you!" Her eyes locked on mine like daggers. But for the first time, no one believed her. No one followed her lead. No one defended her. She was dragged into the car like a queen dethroned, screaming as the door slammed shut. The neighborhood cheered, literally cheered. Mr. Dorsey raised his cane like a sword. Kids clapped. People hugged each other in disbelief. Years of oppression had evaporated in one perfect moment. And I simply leaned against my charger again, rag in hand, polishing the scar she had left on its paint. A scar that would stay as a reminder not of her victory, but of her downfall. The weeks that followed were filled with revelations. Investigators uncovered that she had siphoned HOA funds into a private account, thousands of dollars gone. She had filed dozens of false violations to intimidate families. She had even threatened foreclosure against widows and veterans, with no authority to do so. The headlines wrote themselves: HOA Tyrant Exposed. When the trial came, the courtroom was packed with neighbors who once trembled under her clipboard. Testimony after testimony painted a portrait not of a leader, but of a dictator who thought herself untouchable. And when the gavel finally fell, sentencing her to 2 years for fraud and criminal mischief, a collective sigh of justice rolled through the crowd. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked me what I thought of Deborah's fall. I glanced back at the stone steps where she had been dragged moments earlier, still hurling threats that no one heard anymore. "I think," I said, pausing to let the words sink in, "that sometimes the loudest people in the room forget that power doesn't come from fear. It comes from respect. And when you trade respect for fear, sooner or later, the people will stop being afraid." The reporter smiled, scribbled, and thanked me. I drove home in my Charger that day, the engine purring like my father's voice saying, "Well done, son." The neighborhood was alive again. Kids played. Lawns grew naturally. People waved without suspicion. The reign of Karen was over. And I knew deep down that if she ever dared to come back, we wouldn't need the police to stop her. We had already taken back our power. As I parked in the driveway, I caught my reflection in the car's glossy hood. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not just because Deborah was gone, but because I had learned something vital. Sometimes revenge isn't about rage or destruction. Sometimes revenge is just truth, unveiled for everyone to see. And in the end, the truth had taken her away in the back of a police car, just like she had once demanded from me. Only this time, she didn't get to choose the ride.